I've been building this D-Series from the ground up with a total overhaul of all aftermarket components, all with the goal of making 400 horsepower. So far we've cleaned up and painted everything, as well as porting my head and cutting up our block to make room for the hefty stuff that we're going to throw in today. And the best part is that we're doing it all on a budget. Actually, never mind, that kind of went out the window a while ago. But without further ado, let's get into throwing thousands of dollars in parts at this tiny piece of Japanese aluminum from the 90s. And by the way, I wrote up all my directions for myself with the torque specs and everything while I was doing this, and that is going to be in the description for any of you that might be trying to build one of these too. The only other thing I got to do today before we get started though is I finally have a throttle body. But I actually have something really exciting to show you guys, because I have made a very epic purchase for this build. It's all just laying back here in my trunk at the moment, but if you can see what that is, this is the fun stuff right here. Okay, and this is looking actually really good. And the only problem now is that the idle air control valve hole kind of goes into the actual main bore here. So the easiest way to fix that is I'm gonna just get some JB weld and sort of fill a hole maybe like up to there where my finger is. I'll try to fix it. I'll just probably put a picture of what it ends up looking like here, but I won't show you the whole process on camera. Check this out though. That don't look that bad, right? Pretty good. I mean, really anything beats this twink with its red RTV all over it. And just like that, we've got the entire table laid out to build our head. Basically, it's looking all nice. We got everything ported and ready. All new valves. We're gonna lap them right now. And then once we do that, we have the entire VTEC Valvetrain that we're going to assemble. Brian Crowder springs as well. Those we're gonna throw in. We're gonna reuse the stock retainers and seats, just because I've heard mixed things about titanium ones. We got our boy ready with the little dildo mechanism.
Oh, there you go.
Oh no! But this dildo device is actually a valve lapping device. But Mark 1 here fits a little loose on the valve, so for Mark 2 we're going to incorporate a hose clamp to tighten it, which actually works pretty good, except for the fact that now it hits against the spark plug guides, which means Mark 3 is going to have to involve an angle grinder. Yep, that worked. Let's just hope that that's still adjusted where we need it. Now with our dildo device locked in, all you need is some grinding compound and we lap the valves. These are supposed to have some shiny on the top and the bottom, because you basically want the contact surface in the middle to be as small as possible, which I learned when they all leaked profusely on me, and I had to go to a machine shop and have them do a valve job on my head, and then I had to lap and install everything all over again. Alright, now we have all the valves in. Well, they're not in actually, they're back here, but we have them marked where they're gonna go and they're all lapped. I just installed one spring so that I know what I'm doing, and basically I will show you guys how to install them using this thing. You want this bottom side to go on the valve itself, and then top is going to compress the spring as you turn it. But first we need all the pieces in place, starting with the valve seats first. Then after those are in place, the valve seals, which you lightly oil and hammer on with a 9mm socket. But with the seats in place, the springs can go over them, followed by the retainers. And now you're ready for that spring compressor, and once it's compressed, you can fit the valve keepers in. These go in thick side up. You just carefully put them into place and then release the tension. Now, since that was an absolute blast, I'm gonna go ahead and do it 15 more times. Okay, and on to the valve train, which I have laid out on the table, kind of how it's gonna go. It's basically just the lifters with these separators in between all of them. And the separators are actually numbered. So the one that we're gonna start with is number 1 here, and this is what it'll actually look like. But this is where we turn things up a notch, because it's ditty time. We're going to be lubing everything up, except instead of baby oil, we're using the Lucas Assembly Lube. The way I like to start is just by lubing the shaft right here. Lather that shit right on. You seriously do have to lube the shit out of this stuff though. Now I don't know exactly how it goes, but these two rods are different, but they still only go in one way, so as long as you know the way that the lifters go in order, you can kind of figure it out. Now that the valve train's done though, before we can put it in, we have to set the camshaft in place. So it's finally time to whip out our bougie ass skunk to camshaft. And first I'm just lubing and installing the main cam seal, and then we're going to be putting assembly lube also where the cam will ride only. Now the cam lobes actually get this super special extra thick lube. But with that on, we can carefully place the valve train on top. Once you've got everything here though, before you tighten, you want to make sure that your cam is at top dead center with that original stock cam here. Once that's in place though, I'm going to put my lost motion assembly with all the bolts in place, and then we can finally get to torquing all this stuff down in order. So the 12mm bolts are going to get 14 foot-pounds, and the 10mm bolts get 104 inch-pounds. Now that the head's done, we can get to more of my bougie bullshit, including these Skunk 2 H-beam connecting rods and Vitera piston heads. To put these together, all the wrist pins and holes that they go in get assembly lube. Then make sure to note which side of the rod has markings on it and have that one facing you, and then put the arrow for the piston facing to your left. Now with the snap rings in place, those are together and we can gap the rings. And the best way to do that is to place them in the cylinder they're going to go in and level them out with the piston head, then measure and just adjust as needed. But since I am running a turbo build, I've got these specs here that I'm running. And now we are on to these, which I already separated all the bottoms. You kind of just hold them like this and then hammer on the nut or bolt once you get it loosened. And all these threads still have oil on them from when they come, so you kind of just want to put brake clean in the hole and on the threads to clean all of them. So all these pistons, I just cleaned out the threads like I said, but I did do the rings gapped and installed already. But the thing is, these are directional. Mine have writing on them, so that's how I knew which one was the top. And then the bottom ones don't really matter. You just got to make sure that rib part doesn't overlap on itself. But you are supposed to kind of clock the gaps in a certain spot. So if you see, that's one gap. And then I'm going to try to put the other one on the bottom 180 degrees off. So just same spot on the other side like that. And then the other two should be both like 90 degrees from each other. So one on that side and then one over here. And then once you've got all those clocked, these are going to be just like the main bearings where it's ATF on the inside, and then put all the bearings on, and then we're just going to be dunking the tips in oil to get all the rings oiled. And here is my soup for the piston rings. Now one more thing I forgot, it's just this assembly lube, just like the other ones on the outside of all the bearings. Now that we finally have everything together, we can assemble the block itself, starting with bearings, which will clean the journals that they go in with acetone before lubing them with automatic transmission fluid. Then you're ready to install the actual bearings, which I am using King XP race bearings for this build. Once you do that, you want to lubricate and install bearings on the other half of the girdle the exact same way. Okay, the progress is coming along great. We've got all the pistons with the rings set up. The head is fully assembled, and the girdle and the block both have all the bearings in it. But before we actually put the whole thing together, I've got this plasti gauge, and I guess you want to hold off on oiling the one that you're going to be gauging with the plasti gauge. We'll just assemble it once with plasti gauge in that one, and if it looks good, then we'll put oil in it and put it all back together for a final time. Basically, just like that, straight across, and that's it. And we also oiled everything except for that middle one on the journal. You want to make sure to also oil the threads on these bolts, just with regular 30 weight oil. And now you just torque all of these to spec, and then that way we can crush the plasti gauge just right and then remove it after. The torque spec for this girdle is going to be 14 foot-pounds followed by 38 foot-pounds once again in the order shown. Okay, so that's what got left behind, and then you just want to measure that up against this. My measurement ended up being right under that 0.015, the white one in the middle there. So pretty much that's exactly where you want to be. I'm cool with that. And so we'll just go ahead and take this out for a second so we can put assembly lube on that one that we missed, and we'll reassemble it for the final time. And don't forget to put your thrust washers in the flat side touching the block before your final installation. And now we're ready to put the pistons in, but first you want to just soak a rag in, holy shit, you want to soak a rag in ATF and then just wipe out the cylinder walls with it. Okay, now it's finally time to put the pistons in. I got one in just to make sure that I know what's going on. But basically you want the arrow facing the flywheel, and that's also going to help you line up the rod underneath there to be perfectly straight so it doesn't hit the crankshaft. You also want, like this one is, the crankshaft, basically just turn it until it's furthest away from the one you're working on. You want to make sure all your rings are clocked the way that you left them, and then take your piston ring compressor and make sure when you put it on you're not going to have any gaps in this little crevice, because then you're not going to be closing them. And this has a top and bottom. Mine is not labeled that well. I think the smaller one is the bottom. If you just squeeze this really hard and then hit this a little harder than you would think, you can kind of just push it all in one. Okay, finally it's in. I think I've just come to the conclusion that my tool sucks, because if I kind of maneuver it, I can get it in, but I don't think it's supposed to be that difficult. Now if you flip it over and just make sure your piston's not going to fall out, you can sort of guide it over the crankshaft. And before they go in, you're going to want to use the ARP assembly lube that comes with these on the bolts. You just do a little bit right where the head is going to sit, and then some on the threads. Right about now is the time you're going to start regretting buying all Chinese tools. And you can see a lot better there now. You just line up that hole. I turn it in with a socket pretty much all the way by hand, and then you do it in 2 steps of 21 foot-pounds and then 43 foot-pounds. You can see here that it barely doesn't hit the block. I think I shaved away a lot more than you need to, so yeah, that's about how close it gets right there. Okay, so this is the oil pump that I ended up with. I'm pretty sure this is just the stock one that came out of my original motor. I kind of forgot at this point. You got to take these Allen things to get it apart, and what I'm going to be doing is porting it. The way you do that is just drilling it out and then you shim it with one of these things. I don't know if I have the right one though. These are just what I had laying around. They're supposed to be between like 35 and 40 thousandths. You want to take out this big thingy with the Allen key and the UGDUG, which I was able to do somehow. And that first port right here is just the one that you port out while drilling, but this one is how you shim it, so I'm gonna get that one out. And that is what you're looking for. So basically, this one is definitely too big, but that's what you gotta do with it. Just use it as a washer. All right, so these are the ones I got from AutoZone. They are 1/4 ring terminals, and you just are going to wanna, I think it's a 5/16 drill bit I got, just to open it up enough to get over this little circle here. Unfortunately though, all I got is this pretend vise that's not actually mounted onto like anything, but it should work. Hey, I kind of did it. I mean, it looks pretty fucked up, but I think it'll work. It goes over and it doesn't really stick out much on any side, so it should be fine. Now, before I put that part back together though, I am going to just take this back plate off so I can see what I'm doing when I drill this out. Bro, come on now. What the hell is that? This 5/8 just ate through this frickin' oil pump. So this guy is trash now. I could do a line though. But right under this bolt that I put back, I also stuck a 5/8 drill bit, which definitely was too big. And I got this one as a melling just from AutoZone, which is pretty much as good as you could get from AutoZone, close to OEM. But the 1/2" drill bit that I have right here doesn't fit all the way through like it did on this one, so I think that's what's supposed to happen. This one might have just already been opened up and I tried to open it up too much, but basically a 1/2" drill bit should be what you need, or just maybe a little bit bigger, but definitely not a 5/8. And with that, the oil pump is ported and we can put the whole thing back together with the shim. Now that the oil pump is ported and shimmed, you just lube the main seal with oil and then it gets an O-ring and some RTV. These bolts that go on it get torqued to 96 inch-pounds. Then we can throw the gasket for the oil neck on and then torque that down to the same specs. And I had to get creative removing the rear main seal, but once I got it out, I made sure to clean it up and oil the new one and push it in. This goes the exact same as the oil pump, just with 96 inch-pounds and RTV. And now that the underside is pretty much done, I don't have any gasket or anything on there, but I really wanted to see what this looks like. Oh my gosh, this baby is looking brand new. That bright rear main seal. Everything is painted. Once it's flipped around, it's gonna even look better. This thing is epic. And now this is just what I've seen other people do, but I'm gonna put a little bit of RTV just around the oil pump and the rear main seal housings. And then the gasket should be good for the rest of it. Now with those two in place, we are ready for the oil pan. I would kind of suggest doing this at the end once you're sure that you don't have to open it back up again. But all it is RTV and a gasket with 9 foot-pounds in sequence. So I just threw a little tiny bit of oil on this O-ring. Then we could go ahead and put the water pump on. Pretty much every 10mm bolt on this engine torques to about 104 inch-pounds, which is like 8.5 foot-pounds about. So I just got my torque wrench set and I'm just hitting all these bolts the same. And then we have got the idler pulley, which just goes onto both of these little guide pins, and then the bolt goes in. And I also threw this on. I don't think anything's holding it on right now. I just got the washer thing in between there, and then this lines up with the key and has the gear facing out. And I'm gonna wait to torque down this auto tensioner just because I'll do it when the belt is on. Now before we get to actually putting the head on, I sprayed brake clean in all of these head bolt holes and blew them out thoroughly with an air gun. That way I could wipe down both mating surfaces after with acetone, and we will be ready to install our head. And we're going to be doing that with a Cometic head gasket and dowel pins, and once those are in place we can finally get to my favorite part of this whole thing, which is seeing this beautiful head that we put so much time into finally get placed on the block.
Oh, that's hot.
Okay, now to start with the install of the ARP head studs, I'm just going to be cleaning all of the washer surfaces for the head bolts because we do put these in dry. So all these have two threads. There's the longer one which goes into the block, and then the shorter one goes up into the head. So you want to get the ARP grease. I'm using the same packet from my rods, and for now we're just lubing all the big threads first. And then you're just taking all of them you just did and taking the long and lubed side and just running it down finger tight. Once they're all in, you could just start setting on your washers completely dry. Now that those are on, you can go ahead and get lube on the top of all of these threads. And you're going to also want to get the bottom side of the nuts. And now once we have all of that done, we can finally torque down the head, but this time it's going to be in 3 steps of 15, 30, and then 60 foot-pounds. And by the way, you're going to need a special 12.12mm socket for this. I threw the valve cover on just to check out what it would look like. I'm going to be painting the valve cover. That's probably next as soon as this engine build is done. That'll be the first thing I do, but I've got the manifolds to throw on quick, and probably on a different episode I'll be doing the transmission as part of just a manual swap episode. So if you want to see how to put the transmission on and the clutch kit, everything that I've got for that, as well as just manual swapping in general, all that will be in the manual swap video. I'm just going to do those odds and ends, and then we can get started timing this. For the timing, you need to start by using your stock cam gear again to make sure that the cam is still at top dead center from when you set it the first time, and you do that with these marks. Then install your new one and just mark it real quick in case it moves. You're going to torque that cam gear to 27 foot-pounds and then set the crankshaft to top dead center with these marks. I've got this racing timing belt, and we're going to put it on now that everything is marked at complete top dead center. And that's the way you route it, and once you get here you can kind of pull on the tensioner to give yourself as much slack as you can to get it around the cam. Now once it's on, you've got all this slack, and you're going to want to just rotate the engine just to move it. And once you have the slack moved to where this is tight, you can push this tensioner up as you tighten the tensioner itself. Alright, so the last thing that we're going to have to do is degree in our camshaft, and I've got the Comp Cams kit to do that here. It comes with this dial bore gauge. I just was able to thread in this little hole into the fuel rail, which most people probably won't have their intake manifold on when they're doing this. So in that case, you can kind of either use a magnetic base and set up some kind of way, or it probably would thread into your studs if you have one empty. You just need to make sure everything is really tight because you can't have it move. But then you also want to back off just a little bit this crank nut, and then you can put this Comp Cams disc in between the nut and the crank gear, and you're probably going to have some washers to make sure that this doesn't move as well. Alright, and I was able to get it on just by putting one washer back there, and the next thing you have to do is make a needle point right at 0. So I'm going to use this water pump bolt. Alright, so now the crank is at top dead center, and I have this thing lined up to my pointer that I just made at top dead center. So everything is level. You pretty much just want the 0 up and then the top dead center to have the pointer on it. Now you can go ahead and put in your piston stop into the first cylinder here, closest to the timing belt. And then you want to have your ratchet on tighten and turn it until it's right at 20 degrees here. And now that it's at 20 degrees, you can take the piston stop and thread the screwdriver part in until it actually stops the piston. And now with the piston stop touching the piston, you're going to keep turning it the same direction that you were, and you want to keep turning it until it touches the piston again. And then you can go ahead and mark the spot where it touches, and then turn it the other way and do the same thing until it touches again. Then once it hits again, mark that spot as well. Once you got those 2 marks, you could take your piston stop out, and then you want to find exactly the middle of these 2 marks that you made and set the dial to that. So I ended up at 352.5 and 17.5, and the middle of those was right perfectly at this 5 mark. Okay, and here you want to move it to that center point, but that is going to be your new 0. And then I ended up at 0.5, so I'm just going to leave it because it's pretty much exact anyway. I'll just move my needle to be perfectly at the 0 instead of the 0.5. But what you want to do here is actually 0 out your gauge to whatever that middle of the 2 numbers was. So you set it to the middle, and then you take this off and you 0 it out, and then once it's on there, you can kind of just do the process over again to make sure it didn't move when you remove this nut. But you can just pretty much make that point your new 0. And now we're going to start measuring up here. So you want to make sure that all 4 of your number 1 cylinder valve lashes are set to 0. So basically just back them off and then run them in until they barely touch, and that's it. And once you do that, you want to set the other cylinders to whatever valve lash you're going to actually run. And a good tip in case you don't really know how to set valve lash like I didn't, you're going to want to rotate the engine to when you can see that the cam lobes are completely on the round part, not the part that's actually going to be touching your valves and moving them, so that you can set a baseline, because you want it like set before the cam actually starts messing with it. So you basically just want it to where your max lift on the rocker arm itself is the baseline of just the round part of the cam, if you know what I mean. Trying to get you guys a good view where you could see what's going on, but I'm going to now set the dial indicator to be on the valve itself. So you kind of just want it on the spring part of the valve. Just trying to find a spot where it's kind of straight with it but not touching anything. And I've got it set sprung up a little bit. Now that you guys see where the dial gauge was set, I'm going to take you to where you can actually see what's on the gauge. Alright, so once you have your dial gauge set up, you want to turn the engine clockwise, so tighten on your ratchet until you see it start moving, and then once you do, you want to find the max number it hits before it starts going the other way, which is going to be your max valve lift, which is right there for me. So I'm going to 0 out the gauge right where that number is. So basically you get it 0'd out, and then you keep going another rotation the same direction, and once you hit a full rotation, then you back up and go counterclockwise up to 50, and then you stop exactly on 50. And to do that, a non-ratcheting breaker bar is way easier than a ratcheting one. And now at 50 thousandths, you want to just mark on your degree wheel exactly where that landed. Okay, and now you want to keep going counterclockwise. You want to take it all the way to 0, and then you're going to keep turning it the same way, but the dial is going to back up the other way, and you want to take it back to 50 again. And we didn't change which direction we were turning the crank. We just kept turning it counterclockwise, and the gauge itself went up to 0 and then backed up to 50. So you want to mark that spot again. And once you've done that, you're going to have the 2 numbers marked on your cam degree wheel, and you're going to take the 2 numbers, add them together, divide by 2 to find the center line, just like before, and then whatever that center number is the center line that your cam is currently at. And if you take the piece of paper that came with your cam, it should tell you what the recommended center line is for your cam, and you want to try to match that number with the one that you just made. And the way this works is, for example, my camshaft, which probably most of you, if you're watching this, are going to be running the Skunk 2 camshaft as well, is 223 degrees at intake center line. And since we are measuring the intake spring, we want it at 223 degrees. Now I'm going to do the math on mine, and it looks like we are not super far off from that, but we're probably going to have to adjust it and do this over again to make sure we're at that 223. So on my degree wheel, we've got 204.5 and we have 275.5. So if we add 204.5 and 275.5, we get 480. Divide that by 2, and our center line is at 240, which is super close. Kind of sucks we got to do it again. Where's that paper? We want it to be at 223, right? So yeah, we're like 17 or something like that degrees off. So we're just going to have to advance our adjustable timing gear, or retard, I don't know. I'm not smart enough right now. I got to watch the video. But we got to turn our cam gear one of the two ways to fix our center line. So if your number is higher than your recommended center line, you want to loosen all these and turn your engine counterclockwise, messing with these here. And if it's lower, then you do the opposite and you turn it clockwise. But each of these here is going to be 2 degrees down at the crank. So since we're off 17 degrees, I want to try and loosen all these up and line this thing up to where when I start turning it counterclockwise, down here we go down 8 points. About 8.5 would be ideal, but they're really tiny. So we're going to try to go down 8 points and then measure the whole thing again and see where we land after doing that. Okay. Now that they're all loose, we're going to counterclockwise turn the engine, and oh, I was wrong. I was backwards. So we're going up, but that's 5, 6. Okay, so we went up 8 degrees. Now I'm going to tighten these back down and see where that took us. And I don't think you have to mess with this at all. It just changed the center line, but this is still lined to your zeroed out, whatever you need it. So I'm going to take a Clorox wipe and wipe off my old marks. And we can basically just do it again. So find my max lift. Then we're going to go clockwise a full rotation and then back it up to 50 thousandths. And this time we're at 260. We're gonna mark that. And then we're gonna keep going counterclockwise till it goes 0. And then it's gonna crawl back up to 50. And we wanna set it right at 50. And this time we are at 193. So we're gonna mark 193. And let's measure the difference between those two. So 260 and 193. Okay, so this time we are at 226.5. So we're still a little above that 223. So what we're gonna do is the exact same thing, but just take it a little bit more. I think advanced. Wait, no, I don't fucking know. I'm not pretending like I know. Same way we turned it before, just a little more. All right, praise the Lord, because I finally got it set. I probably had to do trial and error like 20 times. You might not be as stupid as me, but this is where I ended up. Pretty much advanced like 10 degrees, or retarded 10 degrees, and then we were able to get it to 223.25, which is close the hell enough. Now I'm going to tighten the ever-loving fuck out of these so that never moves again, and then we can take this wheel off and we will be ready to just put the crank on and the timing cover, pretty much just be done with this thing. Don't forget before your timing cover is on to put on the crank position sensor that goes there. I think it's supposed to run behind the alternator here, but I didn't, so I'm going to run it under. Alright, so off camera, I've been kind of messing with this thing over time and getting it all just together. I pretty much threw that alternator on, plumbed up some of the sensors and like the wiring up here, the hoses. The last thing I'll do though is just kind of give you guys all a close-up look in case you're trying to do this yourself of where all the hoses go and where all of the sensors go. Now, I did throw in this knock sensor down here is new. That's what that one looks like. It's like a 22 or 24. I think it's a 24 millimeter socket, but obviously you've got your coolant temperature sensor that goes into the thermostat housing. That one is new as well. I threw these two in. This I never took out, but this is basically just a pipe it looks like this. So if you have that, you're gonna put it there, but mine was already there. But I have this, I don't know what these are. They're 2 temperature sensors of some kind for oil or coolant or something, but those 2 go there. And the last one is the oil pressure switch, I think, some shit like that, but that goes right there. And that should be pretty much all the sensors that I messed with, at least. And as far as the routing goes, this one I need to get a new one because it's from the automatic and it doesn't reach, but this goes from the fuel thingamajiggy up to this little tiny port. And I'm not sure what happens with the bottom yet. It might be something for the car side. This line runs from the intake down through that hole and then goes into this little breather box thing, and it goes up into the hole. Mine broke in half, so I got to get another one of those too. But take this all with a grain of salt, but I'm pretty sure that this is all where this goes. It goes from here into that, and then the bottom side runs up into my throttle body. Then this thing runs coolant, the idle air control valve, through the bottom of it. So this one I think goes to the car, and then the other one goes up and around here into this thing, which normally goes into your intake, this part. But what I didn't realize at first is these are 2 separate lines. So this one is coolant and this one is vacuum. So this one, the top goes into the valve cover, and then the other side goes into your stock intake, which I'm gonna have to figure that out later. But then the bottom one goes from the idle air control valve here down into this, and then it runs from the hard line into your coolant right here. And then this one runs from intake manifold into this little sensor, and then the other side and then the other side goes into this little cube thing and then runs, I think, to something on the car. I just got it sitting in here for now. But that's pretty much every hose that I figured out. Take everything with a grain of salt, but it's probably going to give you a good starting place to help you, because there's not a whole lot of information on how to run those that's easily found. But with all that stuff that we threw on, we pretty much have everything that we're able to do outside of the car on, and that's going to be it for today. The next thing you guys are going to see is this valve cover, which I threw the old one on just to see, but we're going to be doing wrinkle red on it, and I've also got all those other ones down there to practice on. But thank you guys so much for watching. Stay tuned for what's coming next on the Civic. Now that the engine's built, we can set it aside for a while and actually get to wrapping and redoing the interior, getting the engine bay ready and everything over on the actual Civic. I'm also going to be manual swapping it, and I'm going to do a standalone video that includes the clutch and everything else that goes with the manual transmission, as well as swapping it and everything you have to do to get it to fit into an auto car. So with that, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Yeah.